always married the wrong women. I tell you, Doc, to be happy in life, you gotta have the right woman. I had a great girl once. She was wonderful, beautiful, bright. I loved her. She was great. I left her for my wife and kids. And my wife, she's a beauty. I told her I was seeing a psychiatrist. She told me she was seeing a psychiatrist, a bartender, and 2 plumbers. I'll tell you, Doc, I'm like the rest of the men in my family. They weren't smart, they were dumb. Well, my Swiss uncle, Gunther Dangerfield.
Rodney Dangerfield had a gift that very few comedians ever truly mastered. He could walk into any room, sit down next to any person, and within seconds have them laughing so hard they could barely breathe. It did not matter how calm, cool, or composed that person was. It did not matter if they were a polished television host, a smooth Hollywood star, or even a former president of the United States. Once Rodney started firing off his jokes, nobody could hold it together. His secret was simple, but devastating. He never stopped. He never slowed down. He never gave anyone a moment to recover before the next joke was already landing. That relentless, rapid-fire delivery was his greatest weapon, and he used it on some of the biggest names in show business. If you enjoy watching legendary comedy moments and want to see more clips of the greatest entertainers of all time doing what they did best, make sure you hit the subscribe button right now. There is a lot more where this came from, and you do not want to miss a single one. One of the things that made Rodney so special was how naturally he connected with other big personalities. He did not try to compete with whoever he was sitting next to. He did not try to outshine the host or steal the spotlight in an obvious way. He just started talking, and before long, the other person was completely gone, laughing uncontrollably while Rodney sat there with that same straight face, moving on to the next joke like nothing happened. Johnny Carson was one of the most professional television hosts who ever lived. The man had been doing live television for decades. He had seen everything, heard everything, and interviewed everyone. It took a lot to make Johnny Carson genuinely lose his composure on camera, but Rodney managed to do it not just once, but repeatedly over the years. On one memorable appearance, Rodney came out talking about his drinking habits, and the jokes just kept coming, one after another without any pause. He told Johnny that when he drinks heavily in Las Vegas, things tend to go sideways in every direction. He talked about losing $1,000 shooting dice and then stealing a large pile of sugar packets from a restaurant to feel like he had gotten something back. The audience lost it, Johnny lost it, and Rodney just sat there, ready with the next one. He also had a running theme about waking up in strange places after a night of heavy drinking. He described coming to in an unfamiliar room with a small child nearby, speaking in an accent and playing with his feet. This kind of absurd, confessional comedy was Rodney at his best. He made you feel like you were getting a genuine window into his chaotic personal life, even though every line was perfectly crafted. That combination of honesty and absurdity was what made him impossible to resist. Dean Martin was another television giant that Rodney had a fantastic chemistry with. Dean was known for being completely relaxed on camera. His entire persona was built around being effortlessly cool and composed. He sipped his drinks, smiled at the audience, and handled everything with a kind of smooth confidence that looked completely natural. But around Rodney, that cool exterior started to crack pretty quickly. Rodney came onto Dean's show and immediately launched into material about his car breaking down. He told Dean that his car had been giving him nothing but trouble for years, and that every single Sunday without fail, he takes his whole family out for a push down the street. He followed that up by saying the one upside is that his car is always easy to find, because it is constantly sitting on a mechanic's lift. The car, he said, had more miles on it going up and down vertically than it ever had going forward. Dean grinned first, then the laughter came out, and Rodney moved straight on to the next bit. What worked so well between those two was how different they were from each other. Dean was laid back and smooth, while Rodney was wound up tight and urgent. But somehow, that contrast made everything funnier. Rodney would be sitting there practically bouncing out of his seat with energy, while Dean leaned back looking comfortable, and yet they clicked together perfectly. Rodney matched Dean's relaxed pace just enough to fit in, but never slowed down his actual joke delivery. It was a delicate balance that not every comedian could have pulled off, but Rodney made it look completely natural. Dom DeLuise was already famous for being a very expressive, very physical laugher. If you put Dom DeLuise and Rodney Dangerfield in the same room, you were basically setting up a controlled explosion. Dom could not hide his reactions, even when he tried. His entire face and body would go when something hit him as funny. So when Rodney started going through his material on the show, Dom became almost as entertaining to watch as Rodney himself. His reactions turned into part of the performance. Rodney kept firing off jokes and Dom kept falling apart, and the two of them together created something that was bigger than either one of them alone. Rodney never played to Dom's reactions or milked them for extra laughs. He just kept going at his usual pace, which somehow made Dom's inability to compose himself even funnier. Jackie Gleason was another legendary figure who Rodney sat down with, and the exchange between them was fantastic. Jackie asked Rodney directly whether it was really true that he got no respect from anyone. Rodney confirmed it immediately and launched into examples. He talked about playing hide-and-seek as a kid and the other children never even bothering to look for him. He talked about having a phone signal system with his friends where they told him to let the phone ring twice, hang up, and not call back. These were classic Rodney bits, perfectly delivered, and Jackie Gleason was completely won over. At one point, Rodney complimented Jackie on looking thin and asked him how he managed it. Jackie gave a setup response asking for the secret, and Rodney told him simply that the trick is to always stand next to people who are much heavier than you are. The audience applauded and Jackie laughed, and the moment was perfect. One of the more unusual appearances in Rodney's career came when Ronald Reagan happened to be in the audience while he was performing with Johnny Carson. Seeing a former president of the United States sitting there laughing at Rodney Dangerfield jokes gave the whole thing a strange and unexpected quality that made it even more memorable. What was remarkable was that Rodney did not adjust anything about his style or his material to account for who was watching. He told the exact same jokes he would have told for any other audience, and Reagan reacted just like everyone else did. There was something both funny and quietly impressive about that. Rodney's comedy did not change based on who was in the room. It was what it was, and people either got swept up in it or they did not. Reagan clearly got swept up in it. The Conan O'Brien appearance was interesting for a different reason. By the time Rodney sat down with Conan, he was in his 70s and had been a household name for decades. Conan represented a younger, hipper, more irreverent style of late-night television, and on paper, Rodney might have seemed a little out of place in that setting. But the opposite turned out to be true. Rodney fit right in and almost immediately made Conan start losing it. He talked about getting married again, this time to a Mormon woman from Utah named Joan. He told Conan he was very happy in the marriage and that next week he planned to marry her sister. Then he added that he also had his eye on her brother, which made the audience erupt all over again. He followed all of that by saying the best part of the relationship was that his wife loved him for his money and his fame rather than for what he actually was as a person. Conan was completely gone by this point. Rodney also did a top 10 list for David Letterman, and it showed a completely different side of his comedy. The list format suited him surprisingly well, even though it was not his natural style. His entries were blunt, strange, and completely committed. He listed things he liked to do, including walking into the wrong bathroom by accident, having sex and leaving immediately afterwards, and playing musical chairs at nursing homes. Letterman recognized quickly that Rodney understood exactly what the format required and was executing it perfectly in his own way. The audience was laughing hard, Letterman was entertained, and Rodney delivered the whole thing with that familiar straight face as if he was reading from a grocery list. The appearance on Red Fox's show deserves special attention because it had a different texture from all the others. Red Fox had a rougher, less polished show than the major network programs, and that environment suited Rodney in a very specific way. Two comedians who had both worked incredibly hard for years to earn their place in the industry were sitting together in a room that felt more real and less corporate than a network studio. Dom opened by acknowledging the long road Rodney had traveled to get real recognition, and that set a tone of genuine mutual respect that ran through the whole conversation. When Rodney started firing off his jokes in that setting, the laughs felt earned in a deeper way. Rodney would respond with knowing laughter, the kind of laughter that only comes from someone who has been in the same rooms and heard the same silence and survived the same rejection. The two of them connected through the shared language of people who had been through the grind and come out the other side. What runs through all of these appearances and all of these moments with different celebrities is the same consistent truth about who Rodney Dangerfield was as a performer. He had built his entire career around the idea of being the person nobody took seriously, the man who got no respect anywhere he went. His whole act was about failure, embarrassment, bad luck, and being overlooked, but the genius of it was that in delivering that material with such confidence, such speed, and such total commitment, he ended up earning exactly the kind of respect his jokes claimed he never received. Every single person he sat next to, from Johnny Carson to Dean Martin to Ronald Reagan to Conan O'Brien, ended up completely helpless with laughter. That is not what happens to someone who gets no respect. That is what happens to someone who is genuinely great at what they do. His vulnerability was the engine of his comedy. He was willing to make himself the butt of every joke, to describe himself as a bad drinker, a lousy husband, an unloved child, a man whose friends had developed an elaborate system to avoid hearing from him. And he did all of it without a single trace of self-pity. He was not asking anyone to feel sorry for him. He was just reporting the facts of his life with a completely straight face and trusting the audience to find it funny. They always did. From the polished studios of Johnny Carson's Tonight Show to the rougher atmosphere of Red Fox's program, Rodney never changed his approach. He walked in, sat down, and started talking. The jokes came fast and they came relentlessly, and whoever was sitting next to him eventually broke. It happened every time, without exception. That consistency, that total confidence in his material and his timing was what made him one of the greatest stand-up comedians who ever lived. He proved that the funniest thing you can do is tell the truth about yourself with complete commitment and zero apology. The man who built an entire career on not getting any respect ended up earning the deepest respect of all, not because people felt sorry for him, but because he was genuinely brilliant at what he did, and nobody who ever sat across from him in a television studio was able to pretend otherwise for very long.